I discovered my neighbor was a haunted killer in disguise. Unbelievable tales await. I never should have opened that door. It was a perfect evening. Birds sang sweetly, and the sun dipped behind the trees, casting shadows on my porch. Everything felt ordinary. But then, my curiosity took a wrong turn. The house across the street, dark windows, an unsettling silence clung to it like fog. I often caught glimpses of him, my neighbor, always in that old flannel shirt, moving like a shadow, lurking by the mailbox as if waiting for something or someone. They said the previous owner had disappeared, vanished without a trace. My heart raced when I noticed him working at odd hours. Late night clanking, whispers in the wind that sent chills down my spine. I wondered what he was doing in that dim light, failing to realize I was inching toward something horrifying. I felt cold even in summer. The air hung heavy with a dank odor, like something long forgotten. My instincts screamed, yet I couldn't shake the dreadful pull. The doorframe creaked as I gripped the handle, knuckles white. Sudden noise made me jump. A loud thump inside his house. I froze. The world narrowed down to that sound, echoing through the stillness. Sweat trickled down my spine. I strained to hear more, breaths shallow as the thought occurred to me. What if he wasn't alone? My heart thundered, an urgent drumbeat in my chest. The shadows danced, taunting me, as if whispering secrets I couldn't grasp. The air shimmered with tension. Would I find a secret, an answer, or something worse? I took a step closer, the gravel crunching beneath my feet. The porch creaked, an ominous warning. I hesitated, breath caught in my throat. A figure shifted in the window, barely perceptible. My stomach twisted. Was that a grin? Sudden movement made me gasp. I stumbled backward, heart racing as I turned to flee. A sharp scream pierced the air. The door swung open, revealing him. Eyes dark, a malevolent flicker glinted in those depths. He stepped forward, shadows enveloping him. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. His presence loomed larger than the shadows that obscured him, as if the night itself had sent a harbinger of dread in human form. I felt my heart drop into an abyss as adrenaline surged through my veins, compelling me to scream or run, but my muscles betrayed me, locked in a frozen tableau. Curiosity can be dangerous, he rasped, each word slicing through the heavy air like a cold blade. A chill punctured my skin, and I felt the weight of something sinister pressing upon me. His expression twisted, a grin that seemed more a grimace, revealing teeth too jagged, too sharp. Instinctively, my mind screamed for escape, but the cold blackness behind him appeared to pulse alive, drawing me like a moth to the flame. What are you doing? I stammered, my voice a tremor on the brink of breaking. He leaned closer, the scent of decay emanating from him, creating a noxious scent that filled my lungs with panic. You shouldn't have come here, he said, a low growl settling in his throat, a warning that echoed ominously in the darkening evening. The dusk crept forward, cautious, as if aware of the sickening magic at play. Just then, the ground beneath my feet felt oddly uneven, a throb that synced with my racing heart. I glanced down, horrified to discover small, dark shapes writhing in the grass, worms perhaps or something worse. Before I could process the implications, another loud crash echoed from within the house, vibrating through the wood and stone. His attention shifted, eyes narrowing, and I took a step back instinctively, feeling the raw panic surge like a tide. We mustn't keep them waiting, he murmured, waving a hand dismissively as he stepped back into the darkness of his house. The door hung ajar, beckoning. The flickering light cast elongated silhouettes on the walls, Shadows of struggles, were they his or the ghosts of those who had vanished before? My body screamed to retreat, yet a morbid curiosity clutched at my heart. I had to know, had to see. Just as I reached the threshold of indecision, a shrill giggle erupted from beyond the door, the sound slicing through the suffocating air like ice. It was a child's laugh, disturbingly cheerful against the backdrop of horror. My thoughts spiraled. What child could possibly find joy in a place like this? Suddenly, two crimson eyes glared from the darkness behind the door, illuminating the narrow space before me. "Join us," echoed a voice soft, yet dripping with malice. The air thickened, urgency gnawing at me as the sounds of scuttling feet echoed inside. The door creaked wider, inviting me further in. Against all sense, the compulsion intensified. I raised a trembling hand, hesitating inches from the door frame, when the laughter turned into a shriek, a sound of pure terror entwined with the echoes of 1,000 lost souls. I stumbled back, colliding with the porch railing as my heartbeat thundered in unison with the gnawing dread. Who were the U.S. in his sinister invitation? And where were those haunting sounds emanating from? In that moment, from behind the door, an agonized wail cut through my consciousness, tearing at the fragile threads of my courage. The last glimpse of his face, the grin now transformed into a grimace of impatience, settled deep within my mind as I finally turned to flee. But the night had woven its web, and the shadows around me thickened, reaching with icy fingers, entrapping me in the very air I breathed. And then, a whisper filled with dread surrounded me. "You can't escape the truth," it hissed, as a strong grip surged around my ankle. It tugged hard, pulling me toward the open door, and I realized with horror. I was no longer standing on solid ground, and I felt the earth shift as darkness embraced me. The last thing I saw before falling into the shadows was the smile of a child, no longer innocent, no longer human. The world twisted beyond recognition, and I screamed as the light faded to nothing, darkness drinking my voice like a thirsty demon. And then, silence. The silence around me felt dense, a thick fog that numbed my senses. For a moment, there was no thing, no sound, no sensation of falling, just an oppressive weight pressing against me. I flailed in the void, panic clawing at my throat. Was I in the house? Had I crossed that threshold? Or had I been pulled somewhere else entirely? My body felt hollow, my mind a swirling mass of fear. When I finally crashed into something hard, pain jolted through me, awakening a rush of adrenaline. I blinked against the darkness that enveloped me, struggling to discern my surroundings. I pushed myself up, and the coldness of the floor seeped into my skin, sending shivers through my spine. The air tasted stale, heavy with a sickly sweet odor reminiscent of spoiled milk. Slowly, a faint light began to glow, pulsating like the last dying embers of a fire. Shadows danced upon the walls, merging and separating as if alive, whispering secrets I dared not comprehend. I rubbed my eyes, and when I looked again, the light revealed a room, a chamber filled with rusted tools and tattered children's toys. Each object seemed to pulse with a sinister energy, as if they were remnants of long-forgotten horrors. "Help me," a voice whimpered from the corner, and I whipped around, heart racing. A little girl, her dress torn and soiled, cowered beneath a heap of blankets. She looked at me with wide saucer eyes, a glimmer of hope mixed with dread haunting her gaze. "Please, you have to get out," that I stepped cautiously closer, every instinct screaming that I should run. But her plea anchored me. "What happened? What is this place?" I whispered, scanning the room for any signs of escape. Her gaze darted nervously to the far wall. "He knows you're here," the storysteer waking up. The shadows fluttered, gathering strength like a storm brewing. I glanced back and saw dark shapes coiling in the periphery, mischievous and hungry. "Who knows him here?" I pressed, shaking with urgency. "The man with the crooked smile," she exclaimed, her voice rising in a frantic pitch. "He collects souls, and once you're in his grasp, you can't leave." The others wanted to warn you, but her voice trailed off, fear consuming her. I trembled, the weight of her words crashing over me like waves against a shore. Memories flooded my mind, the sinister figure, the screech of laughter, the whispers in the dark. I hadn't wandered into just any home. This was a prison for the damned. A sudden thud echoed from the door behind me, pulling my attention like a magnet. My pulse quickened when I realized it had been sealed shut, now adorned with gnarled, twisting roots that snaked around the frame. The walls pulsed as if breathing, and I could hear faint, anguished murmurs emanating from them, begging for release. "We have to leave now," I urged the girl, grabbing her hand, but she shook her head violently. "Oh, you don't understand. If he finds you, he'll take you, too." In that instant, the door creaked open, and a slice of malevolent light infiltrated the darkness. There stood the man with the crooked smile, his eyes gleaming like knives. "Ah, there's my darling little guest." He stepped inside, the shadows enveloping him as if they were his second skin. "I see you've made a friend." I froze, my blood running cold, the breath hitching in my throat as his gaze met mine. The room vibrated with an electric tension, the very air thickening with something dark and voracious. Behind him, the giggling return-eat chorus of taunting laughter that drowned out the girl's whimper. "Step forward, my dear." He beckoned, voice smooth yet sinister. "Your stories will make such delightful additions to my collection." "Oh," I screamed, the primal instinct to flee igniting within me. I tugged at the girl, desperately attempting to pull her away. But before I could move, the shadows coalesced into thick tendrils, wrapping around my arms and legs, dragging me back toward the man. "Your curiosity has led you here, sweet child, and now you belong to the story," he taunted, his jagged teeth gleaming in the waning light. I fought against the dark tendrils wrapping tighter around me. With each struggle, the shadows seemed to tighten their grip on reality itself, pulling me further into their insidious embrace. The girl was slipping out of my grasp, her eyes wide and pleading. "Don't let him take you. Fight it," she cried, but her words faded as the shadows consumed her, pulling her into their depths, joining the chorus of agonized sounds swirling in the air as the world around me dimmed, and the man's laughter intertwined with the haunting shrieks of lost souls. I realized with dawning horror that I was about to lose the battle. And just as the darkness began to swallow me whole, I felt a sudden sharpness pierce my shoulder, something cold and metallic. Time froze, and in that inescapable moment, my scream echoed once more. But this time it was not just a plea for help. It was a warning. "Please, don't let him win," I screamed. As the shadows closed in, and then, everything went black. Every sound, every whisper, dissolved into a void where anguish thrived and time was meaningless. The darkness wrapped around me like a suffocating shroud, thick with the stench of despair, eroding my identity. My name, my past. It all faded like the flickering light that had shown me brief flickers of hope. And this abyss, visions flared to life, children with hollow eyes, their faces twisted in eternal fear. They darted through the shadows, their small, fragile forms soldiers in a war against an unseen terror. I strained against the oppressive weight that pressed me down, but the more I fought, the more powerful the darkness became. Suddenly, an inkling of motion brushed against my consciousness, a memory, perhaps. I recalled the girl's terrified gaze as she was devoured, leaving only a ghostly echo behind. Determined to break free, I screamed again, pouring every ounce of my will into that cry, desperate for someone, anyone, to hear me. "Help, please." I refused to be just another story. And then, in the heart of the blackness, a glimmer of light returned, faint yet persistent. It pulsed like a heartbeat, drawing me closer, whispering promises of escape. I slid toward it, feeling the darkness writhe and recoil, reacting as if in pain from my movement. But each inch I traveled toward that light only fueled my desperation. Was it truly a way out, or merely another trap laid by the crooked man? The thought gnawed at my resolve, but my instincts screamed for survival. With each millimeter I pulled myself through the murk. The darkness hissed, urging me to stay, urging me to embrace the stories woven from horror and loss. The crescendo of tormented wails surrounded me again, the children's chorus of fear mixing with an ominous chant that echoed through the very fabric of the void. The man had woven this place like a web, each soul a thread in his unholy tapestry. As the light grew closer, the shadows recoiled, almost as if I were exposing their secrets, their dominion threatened. Just as I reached the threshold where light met darkness, a very different silhouette invaded my sight. The man with the crooked smile emerged, his form grotesque and shimmering, wild with delight at my struggle. Ah, sweet child! Clinging tenaciously to hope, his voice slithered through the air. But hope is a fragile thing, just like a thread in the wind. The shadows swelled, rising like a storm, clawing at my feet, desperate to drag me back into their embrace. "Don't you see?" he whispered as he stepped closer, his voice filling me with dread. "The darkness is your true home. You can't escape your fate." That twisted smile widened, revealing rows of jagged teeth shining in the strange luminescence. Panic surged within me. I jerked backward, launching into the light with an energy I had not known I possessed. Yet the darkness retaliated, reaching, grasping. Just as my fingertips brushed the golden glow, something sharp grasped my ankle, pulling me down. "No!" I shrieked, the word more a raw instinct than sound. The light flickered, threatening to snuff out. I felt a powerful tug of despair, as if the very essence of the shadows were clinging to me, each one screaming to be a part of my tale of horror. Then, something unexpected happened. A flash of movement from the corner of my eye. Shapes broke free from the shadows, coalescing into forms I recognized. The lost souls, children whose lives had been extinguished, their faces marred with pain and longing. They hovered above me, their spectral presence shimmering with unresolved sorrow. "Help us," they cried, an anguished echo ringing in the air. "Break the story. Don't let him win." Racing memories filled my mind, visions of their innocent laughter before the darkness swallowed them whole. A sudden spark ignited a fire within me. "Together!" I shouted with one last desperate surge. I lunged toward the light, calling out to them, reaching for their swirling forms. "Together, we can fight him!" The moment our souls connected, a wave of flame erupted, engulfing the chamber. I could feel the darkness withering, just as it had once tried to consume me. But the man was not done yet. "You think you can break free?" he hissed, the malevolence unyielding. "I will not let you leave." As the room pulsed with energy, something snapped. The glow erupted into a brilliant burst, and the shadows recoiled, leaving behind deafening silence. I felt weightless, and then, before I could understand what was happening, I plummeted again, not into the dark but into an uncharted reality shimmering with untold dread. But as I opened my eyes, I was no longer alone. The walls were covered in fresh, crimson markings. The children's cries were gone. Visions of the man loomed large in the corner of my eye, more vivid than before, a promise etched neatly upon them. Just then, a single, brittle voice echoed through the veil of fear, soft and sinister. "Welcome to your new story." And then, behind me, I felt a cold bray, the low, eerie whisper slithering into my ear. "We've been waiting for you." My heart raced, realization crashing over me like a tidal wave. No escape, only a deeper descent into the horror. The air around me thickened, nearly suffocating as I scanned the shadows flickering along the walls. The markings seemed to writhe and pulse, each stroke of crimson telling a story born out of anguish. My own name was lost beneath the weight of these ghastly tales, overshadowed by whispers of the tormented souls who had passed through this ominous threshold before me. "Waiting for me?" I echoed, desperate to ward off the fear tightening around my throat. A shadow flickered behind me, brief yet insistent, jerking my awareness back to the reality that was anything but normal. It felt like an invisible current coursing through the air, drawing my attention to the far corner of the room, where the darkness seemed denser, almost alive. "Don't be afraid." The voice weaved its way through my thoughts, a sickly sweet tone that coiled around my mind like a serpent. "You're part of a grand narrative now, a story to be crafted in the annals of our existence." The words wrapped around my thoughts, suffocating any remaining will to resist. I stumbled backward, the chill of fear radiating from that festering corner where shadows tangled like fingers waiting to ensnare me. It dawned on me with horrifying clarity. I was no longer just a victim but rather a component of this malignant tapestry. My essence interwoven with the malevolent deeds of unseen horrors. A soft chuckle reverberated through the room, chilling me to the bone. The crooked man emerged from the shadows, a figure composed of darkness and defiance. His smile wider, more grotesque than before. Each tale needs a hero, little darling, he crooned, his eyes glinting with something dark and malicious. And there's no one better suited than you. Panic flooded my veins as I fought against the heavy veil of despair that clouded my mind. Desperately, I scanned my surroundings, searching for a way out, a path of freedom that seemed so distant now. But panic turned to realization as I felt the spectral presence of the lost children, their anguish resonating within my heart, rallying me to resist. I won't be part of your wretched story, I shouted, my voice trembling yet defiant. The air thickened with a charged energy as if my resistance momentarily disrupted the dark harmony surrounding us. The crooked man stepped closer, his elongated fingers brushing against the air like a conductor leading an orchestra of fear. Ah, but sweet child, he mocked, your very essence feeds the fears of others, deepening the tales forged in blood. You cannot escape what you are. And then, with a wave of his skeletal hand, the very fabric of reality began to shift like a marionette under his command. I felt an icy draft swirl around me, entangling my thoughts in confusion while the crimson markings on the walls throbbed wildly, revealing images of past horrors. Families torn apart, lives snuffed out like candles in a storm. The tantalizing pull of the shadows intensified, an invitation beckoning from a place where time had no hold. I gasped as I glimpsed the faces of acquaintances, lost friends with mouths sewn shut, eyes wide with horror. They emerged from the walls, their spirits trapped within the torment that defined this cursed existence. Join us, they rasped in unison, their voices a chorus of sorrow. Join us and your story can begin anew. We can craft a tale far more terrifying than you can imagine. The sickening sensation of dread gripped my insides as I staggered backward, ready to flee. Yet the shadows were all-consuming, wrapping around my limbs, urging me to yield. That I refuse. I shouted, desperate for clarity, and a way to escape the sinister fate looming over me like an ominous storm. But in that moment of defiance, a cacophony of laughter erupted behind me, a sound both joyous and filled with malice, like children playing games of torment. They knew I could not escape their realm, their insatiable hunger for a new narrative. As the walls closed in, the voices of the long-dead children crescendoed in a haunting symphony, their cries scratching against the very fabric of my being. Help us break free, they lamented, their faces now twisted into grotesque masks of despair and longing. With a surge of courage, I pushed aside the despair, channeling the collective desperation of all those who had come before me. We will break this, I shouted, summoning the strength to resist the shadows. But as the darkness writhed around me, a cacophony of whispers erupted, swirling viciously like a storm, drowning my resolve. No, you are part of us now, the crooked man hissed, his form stretching into the darkness, melding into the shadows that coiled angrily around me. You have nowhere to go. Your story becomes ours. Just as I thought I might be overwhelmed by their sinister chant, an unexpected pain lanced through my wristed jagged edge brought me stark clarity, causing me to look down. A sharp shard of glass, its surface glimmering, lay at my feet, its reflection taunting me. The realization slammed into me. It could be the key or my demise, and yet, with that single moment of clarity, a voice ruptured through the air, hauntingly familiar and desperate. It was the girl, the one I had seen devoured. Don't let it end like this. Use it. Use the pain instead of letting it consume you. Heart racing, I grasped the shard tighter, breathing heavily, knowing that any falter now might seal my fate forever. You dare defy? The crooked man rasped, rage bubbling in his voice, the shadows curling protectively around him. But I felt power surging within me, forcing my voice steady as my other hand gripped the jagged piece of glass. I choose my own fate, I screamed, launching the shard toward the beating heart of darkness. As it cut through the air, time seemed to freeze, and the shadows shrieked, recoiling as if they had been struck. The moment hung like fine mist in the air, electrifying and thick with tension. And then, as the shard pierced the core of darkness, a blinding light exploded, enveloping everything in its wrath. And for a harrowing second I wondered if it would all end in light or if the darkness had something more sinister awaiting me in the aftermath. The blinding light receded, exposing the remnants of the room now teetering on the brink of oblivion. Reality, as I understood it, frayed at the edges like an old tapestry, threads shifting and unraveling with every heartbeat. Skewed shadows flickered eerily along the walls, rising ferociously like beasts disturbed from slumber. The air was charged, laden with anticipation and the remnants of agonizing cries that formed a chorus of anguish echoing through the void. The crooked man now stood motionless, his grotesque grin faltering for the first time, merging with the darkness that had, until now, granted him dominion, his form wavering like the flicker of a candle caught in a storm. "What have you done?" His voice dripped with disbelief and rising fury, fragments of his darker self splintering around him. I felt the darkness recoil, yet an unsettling uncertainty seeped into my consciousness. Had light conquered the abyss? Or had I merely awakened a dormant, deeper malevolence? My heart thundered against my ribs, limbs tingling with adrenaline and an acute awareness of the danger still lurking within those fraying links of reality. Suddenly, the once dive bomb of shadows began shifting again, twisting into grotesque figures that seemed to surge from the remnants of the chakra-longing souls reaching desperately toward the light. As they swirled, they began to morph into glimmering reflections of the lives they had lost, faces of children, relatives, friends, face upon face filled with silent screams, envy, and an unquenchable thirst for vengeance. Instinctively, I took a step back, feeling the tingling of their resentful spirits seep into my skin like icy water running through veins. "You think you set us free?" They mumbled in unison, their voices maddeningly chaotic yet tragic. "You merely released the shackles that held us captive, only to bind us to you." Each word curled around me like cold smoke, causing a deep-rooted dread to thrum within. I now bore their burden, their haunted cries threading through my very soul, demanding justice yet denying me rest. The realization of my new truth clawed at my mind. They were now tethered to me, bound in this macabre storytelling, each specter searching for a release from their bitter histories. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, voice wavering as the figures loomed closer, proffering skeletal hands towards me, gripping with the weight of their stories. I felt their grief, their pain penetrating the fragile defenses I had rallied against the malevolence. "You cannot bear this darkness. Let me help you." In one disorienting rush, the memories surged like floodwaters, twisting in a surge of chaos. Each face an echo of happier moments turned grotesque. They advanced, ethereal yet hauntingly familiar, conveying untold stories of betrayal, violence, and sorrow. It was clear their ties to me could not be severed. I had unwittingly become their vessel, the unwelcome hero of their cursed saga. But then, amidst the swirling chaos, a familiar face emerged, the girl whose spirit had once guided me through desperately dark terrains. Her eyes were wide with urgency, a beacon of light in the suffocating shadows. "We need to break the bond," she urged, extending her spectral hand toward me, a lifeline in a sea of despair. "You're the key to our escape," and there's a sharp pang of determination pierced through the haze of fear. "But how?" I cried as the voices around me swirled into a tempest, harmonizing in a chilling symphony of vengeance. "How can I possibly help?" "I'm just one. Use the shard," she insisted, her ghostly silhouette flickering with intensity as the shadows threatened to engulf her. "Only through you can the cycle be broken. Your pain can be their salvation." I looked down at the jagged piece of glass still clutched in my hand, the remnants of terror I had wielded moments ago now shimmering with potential. Each glint offered a thread of hope interwoven with despair. What if this shard, now pulsating with a life of its own, could sever the ties that bound the tortured souls? The air thickened with palpable fear. As the crooked man's laughter filled the void, a menacing echo reminding me of the urgency. "You're too late, darling," he jeered, shadows crawling toward me with grotesque intent. reforming around his figure as if seeking his very being. They don't want to be free. They crave what you've become, a keeper of secrets, a conjurer of horrors. You belong to me now, and there's no escape, and yet, as I raised the shard, a recollection surged, the stories buried in my mind from childhood. Tales spun of courage overcoming nightmares, of bonds severed with sacrifice. My breath quickened. No, I shouted defiantly, embracing the swirling chaos when clarity struck like lightning. You will not take me. With a strength I didn't know I possessed, I drove the shard into the diffuse heart of swirling shadows, a final desperate thrust that sent tremors through the air, awakening echoes that had long been forgotten. As the glass plunged, a vicious roar erupted, threatening to tear the dark fabric apart, and the shadows screamed, and the cacophony rose like a tide, crashing against the walls of my sanity as I felt a jagged burst of light shatter the darkness. Then everything erupted into chaos's cyclone of screams, memories, and shrieks that battered against my senses until I could no longer distinguish between the living and the dead. And just as the walls began to buckle under the force, a hand reached for me. A figure emerged through the seething mass, and I felt icy fingers grasp my wrist. "Help us," it whispered, the voice both familiar and foreign, stretching forth in desperate need. But as I turned to face whatever horror awaited, my heart plummeted as I caught a glimpse of the figure's face half-formed, torn between life and death, and strikingly familiar. My own reflection stared back at me, fragmented and twisted, revealing the horrifying truth I had tried to deny. And then darkness consumed me entirely. A cacophony of whispers wrapped me in their icy grasp as I teetered on the precipice of despair. The familiar face before me, a grotesque mockery of my own, smirked, widening into a chasm of darkness pulling me under. How had I come to this? A realm where light and shadow warred within the very essence of my being. A swirling vortex of lost souls tethering themselves to the very reflection I loathed. With horrid clarity, I remembered. The crooked man, his sinister intentions interwoven with the shadows that were now clawing at my essence, had succeeded in binding me to the restless spirits, and they were hungry for release, yet I could not further my own escape without succumbing to their fate. My body shuddered against the alien touch of my tormented self, memories cascading through the air like scattered leaves caught in a storm. "Join us," it hissed, its voice a haunting echo of my own, yet corrupt and venomous. "Let us in, let us share your pain." I gritted my teeth, the shard still pulsating in my hand, a faint glimmer of hope flickering beneath the shadows like a lighthouse in a storm. But as I gripped it tighter, riddled with doubt, the very atmosphere thickened, pulsating with a malevolent energy that made my skin prickle. Suddenly, like a snap of a string, reality warped around me, flinging me deeper into a darkness more profound than I could comprehend. The voices rose once more, growing frenzied. "Break the cycle. Escape while you still can." And then silence. The whispers faded to whispers of breath, as the shadows began to scatter, twisting and writhing as if they were a Livian exodus of lost souls, fleeing from something far worse. Emerging from the depths of that silence, the crooked man's laughter pealed through once again, chilling and mocking, vibrating the walls with its malice. "You think you can sever the bonds?" he taunted, his figure coalescing as the shadows formed jagged edges around him. "They won't leave you, dear. They crave your light, your essence. You're theirs now, a living tapestry of anguish." With a sudden jolt of instinct, I whipped my head back to the shadow wraith, the reflection still morphed in disfigured agony. Memories tumbled through my mind like a torrent, old haunts surfacing with relentless fury. My childhood, a tapestry of laughter now tainted by the shadows of what was yet to come. I thought of my neighbor, the seemingly unassuming figure living right across the hall. A man of few words, he often lingered just out of sight, a specter in his own right, his hush mesmerizing, his movements smooth. Whispers had brewed around him, half-voiced fears of odd happenings, of midnight cries echoing from his apartment. I dismissed the murmurs, but now, I felt tethered, haunted not just by the souls I had inadvertently released, but by an unseen malevolence that loomed in proximity, waiting, watching. Frantically, I pivoted, The shard gripped tightly as I searched for a path among the shadows. "They want to claim you, too. The darkness craves a vessel," shouted the ghostly girl, her voice spiraling around me like a protective shroud. "You must resist." But before I could fully grasp her words, the room swelled with new energia presence rippled through the air, thickening as if the very fabric of reality shuddered at the appearance of an unseen force. Suddenly, all light flickered. In the dimness, unmistakable shapes began to coalesce in the corners of the room, oppressive and grotesque. My neighbor materialized from the depths of blackened space, his eyes glinting with a horrid hunger. "You've meddled where you shouldn't have, dear friend," he murmured, stepping forward, shadows swirling around him like a cloak. "This was to be a night of deliverance, but you've ruined it. Now, there will be consequences." My pulse thundered, realization crashing over me in waves. A new nightmare birthed, a horror festering within the boundaries of my own home. "Let them go," I shouted, desperation igniting within me, but with my own voice, dread curdled. I witnessed the small flicker of a grin appear on his lips, and in that twisted moment of revelation, I understood the truths I had buried were surfacing like malodorous refuse, connecting us in unhallowed ways. "You see." He paused, tilting his head as shadows enveloped him. "I have been waiting for you. Together, we'll plunge into the depths, a resurgence of lost dreams, a reunion of the damned. You can be the anchor they seek." Before I could respond, laughter erupted like bitter thunder, and the shadows surged for Warden army of lost souls, amalgamating into a monstrous visage of regret and vengeance. A riotous cacophony that clawed at my sanity, so tight was my grip on that shard, the jagged glass digging into my palm, tender and warm, yet filled with potential. Would I succumb, or would I reclaim my narrative from the chains binding me? With everything within me, I thrust the shard toward my neighbor, toward the spreading darkness that desired my very soul, and watched as shadows recoiled in wild terror. "You will not take me," I screamed, powerful and defiant. But then, just as suddenly, I was met with his chilling amusement, a twisted smile that pierced through the eve of despair. Finally, a horrible truth dawned upon me as I noticed the very walls of reality bending around us, cracking like fragile glass. Whatever I had awakened craved more than just souls. It wanted dominion. As the air grew electric, a dreadful rattle erupted within the void behind him, and an anguished wail resonated around me, echoing from the depths of the shadows. Something hadn't just been unleashed. Something had been awakened. And as I staggered back, the light flickered once more, revealing the swirling forms of trapped souls, no longer seeking freedom but drawn towards the beckoning darkness, whispering promises of power and revenge. "You must choose," my silhouette echoed, the air thickening with dread. "Escape or join the darkness." But know this: before the twisted figure could finish, the world collapsed around me, shattering under unseen pressures as the walls of our realities tore wide open. A gateway forged in suffering, a plunge into an expanse that held a grim secret. And at that moment, as I hung in proverbial limbo, the fracture erupted into chaos, and I was left teetering on the brink, staring into an abyss that dared me to step forward. The air hummed with an anticipation that made my skin crawl, the harmony of whispers transforming into a scream just below the threshold of hearing. The shard in my hand pulsed, its warmth leaving a burn where flesh met glass. Instinctively, I tightened my grip as I stared into my neighbor's eyes, now swirling with an obsidian void that seemed to devour all light. Each breath came in labored gasps, fueled by a primal fear that clawed at my throat. "You think you've found strength?" he taunted, stepping closer amid the cacophony of tortured souls, their forms warping into grotesque figures hovering just out of reach. "You don't even understand the power that comes from surrendering. They call to you, begging for an anchor, for someone to guide them home." The laughter echoed, reverberating within the confines of my mind. I could feel them. They were there, woven into the shadows around me, maybe even beneath my skin. A tempest of despair surged with their cries, clawing deeper into my consciousness. I staggered back, trying to escape the crushing weight of the grips around my soul. Yet, the walls seemed to close in, the room stretching and contorting until it felt more prison than sanctuary. You are part of this now, the crooked reflection whispered, its multitude of despair echoing from the faces of the shadows. You don't get to decide anymore. They need you. In a frenzied panic, I turned and fled toward the door, the only escape from the darkness that voraciously lunged after me. The whirling mass of lost souls converged, their presence like a torrential storm, desperate for unity and vengeance. The knob of the door felt slimy under my touch as I twisted it, desperation flooding my veins. It refused to budge, the wood splintering under the pressure as if it, too, were a victim of this abhorrent merging of worlds. Run now, my friend. The voice of the ghostly girl rang out, her form hazy but maddeningly clear. You must not let the shadows take you. Not with him. As I threw my shoulder against the door, a sickening crash resounded. I could hear my neighbor's laughter morphing into the manic cacophony of wails and cries, mingling with the haunting symphony of desires that twisted in the air. Through the rickety wood, I felt the darkness press against me, a tangible force. I was the fulcrum in a balance, teetering dangerously toward a fate I couldn't decipher. And then, miraculously, the door gave way, flinging me into the corridor. The blaring light from the hallway felt blinding, yet intoxicating, invigorating my limbs with every ounce of hope. But as my foot crossed the threshold, the shadows shrieked in unison, an unholy chorus of fury that thundered behind me. No, I heard my neighbor's voice, deep and sinister. You can't escape me. I bolted down the hall, the floorboards creaking beneath my weight as panic surged in my chest. But with every step, I felt the shadows chase. They grew closer, the cold breath of the tortured souls brushing against my neck. The whispers morphed into mournful chants of tempest beckoning for my return within the darkness. Fumbling around the corner, I spotted the last flickering light the way out, a soft glow at the end of the hall that filled my heart with a rush of desperation. As I sprinted toward salvation, I glanced back just in time to see a hideous amalgamation of faces and twisted features emerge from the shadows behind me. A monstrous embodiment of my neighbor's spirit sewn together by suffering and regret. No, no, I gasped, terror gripping my insides as the horror surged forward, reaching out with arms of darkness, ready to drag me down into their collective despair. I could not let them take me. I forced myself into motion, willing my feet to carry me faster. But as I neared the exit, a chilling sensation coiled around my ankle like fingers of ice. The shadows lunged, pulling me back into their depths. I stumbled, tripping over a tangle of whispers that intertwined into a net of sorrow. The breath caught in my throat as I clawed at the floor, but it was no use. The darkness grasped my soul, cold and unyielding. And then, everything went silent. In the pressing gloom, I looked up to see my neighbor standing at the doorframe, the cruel inferno of hell's fury dancing in his eyes. His silhouette stretched like a ghastly imitation of the figure I once considered normal. "Welcome," he said, the word dripping with an unfathomable promise. The room began to twist around me, worlds collapsing into each other as I was pulled closer to the shadows. "You wanted to escape?" he continued, the shadows swirling in sync with his voice. "Why would you wish to leave when you've only just begun to understand? There is power in the breach, dear friend." My heart raced, pumping adrenaline through my veins like poison. And then, something dawned on me. The fate I feared was more than just my own. All along, they hungered for something greater, something that only I could give them. Terror tightened its grip on my throat as he stepped closer, the shadows swirling in anticipation. The interplay of light and darkness began to obscure my judgment, and I struggled against the suffocating pull. But in a moment of clarity, for just a heartbeat, I saw them again, the trapped souls, their forms writhing in agony, no longer shadows but desperate individuals pleading for freedom. Suddenly, one of them broke through the chaos, ghostly fingers reaching out, brushing against my shoulder. "You can save us?" it whispered, a desperate plea amid the rising dinchus. And then, as if the very fabric of reality shifted beneath my feet, I felt the merging a catastrophic collision of fate, choice, and consequence crashing in on itself. With every ounce of hope thrumming in my heart, an anguished scream broke through, preceding the night's critical turning point, and I found myself suspended on the brink of understanding what could unravel as everything split apart. Light fracturing into 1,000 shards, I reached for the souls, for my escape, and for the truth hidden beneath the layers of darkness. But in that fragile moment, my world split open entirely, leaving me standing amidst a swirling chaos, where I was not the only one compelled to choose. The question hung as the darkness closed in. Which side of the abyss were we truly on? And just as I took a step forward to decide, the shadows surged and enveloped me, and reality plunged into an unfathomable abyss. I emerged into a different reality, one where gravity felt foreign and sounds became smears of indistinct color across my ears. The air thickened with a freezing chill that clawed at my skin, and the light from the outside world flickered uncertainly. It was as if I had stumbled into a nightmare-manifested twisted version of my neighborhood, adorned in the ghastly remnants of what it once was, cobbled streets twisted unnaturally, lined with spectral silhouettes of houses that loomed larger than life. Their windows gazed like hollow eyes, void of warmth, while a dense fog crept over the ground, shrouding everything in hushed whispers. I could hear them again, the sorrowful cries and pleading voices, mingling together like a disorganized symphony, each note a lament to a life left unfulfilled. I felt the remnants of the shards in my pocket, a whisper of warmth amidst an encroaching coldness. Something inside me urged me to seek out the source of the wails, to try and grasp the desperation that had pulled me in. Though fear clawed at my insides, the need to confront the darkness swirled with a curiosity I could not suppress. With hesitant steps, I ventured deeper into the fog, each footfall resonating against the cobblestones, echoing like a heartbeat in this world devoid of life. The fog began to coalesce into phantoms, aspects of the lost souls seeking solace. They drifted around me, their pallid forms igniting memories of my neighbor, their eyes just as empty, filled with despair as they reached out to me. "Help us," one woman wailed, her voice straining against the weight of her longing. "Free us from this torment." Before I could respond, her figure flickered, distorting as if pressed into the ether by an invisible force. Panic surged through me. I dared not linger. Yet the cries came from every direction, pulling on my heartbeat as if calling me to rescue them. I stumbled upon a clearing where the fog was denser, the chorus of calls converging into a haunting melody that wrapped around me, binding my fate with theirs. Amidst the shadows, I saw a framed photograph, its edges frayed, lying upon the cobblestones. I bent to pick it up. In the photograph, captured in monochrome, stood the faces of those I had once known, neighbors, friends, even children from years past, now mere echoes of the lives they had led. Their eyes stared back with a mix of fear and regret, unaware of the fate that would ensnare them in this morose realm. "What have you done?" A voice, lower and sinister than the rest, sliced through the air, sending a chill through my bones. I whirled, heart racing. It was my neighbor, his form twisting and contorting as if he were both present and absent, caught between worlds. "They were mine first," he hissed, stepping closer, the shadows swallowing his lower half as he glided through the fog. "And now they wish to take you, my precious anchor." "No. You're lying," I shouted, though doubt gnawed at my resolve. That he laughed, a hollow sound resonating in the stillness, each note steeped in malice. "You've already chosen," he growled. "Now they want to claim your essence, to your fear, your love, all of it, to join them in this purgatory." Desperation flooded my veins. I clutched the photograph tightly, feeling the edges dig into my palms like thorns. Suddenly, the faces within it erupted into a kaleidoscope of colors before distorting into grotesque shapes. "Help us!" they screamed in unison now, voices layered in torment. One face, a child bearing an innocent smile, warped into a ghastly scream, shattering my heart. With the chaos swirling around me, I knew I had to act. But the presence of my neighbor loomed closer, and the boundaries of my safety began to fracture. I forced myself to walk farther into the clearing, the shadows grasping at my ankles, ready to drag me down into the abyss that awaited. As I crossed the threshold of light, there was a sudden stillness. The shadows hesitated as if gauging my resolve, the agonizing cries fading into whispers, a singular voice breaking free from the congregation. Trust your heart, it implored, resonating deep within me. It was the voice of the ghostly girl, the spectral figure that had offered help before. You must choose the truth before it consumes you. In that terrifying moment, realization pummeled through my mind like a suffocating wave. Every soul trapped here sought release, but at what cost? Would I become a vessel for their anguish, a harbinger of darkness? Swinging back toward the specter of my neighbor, I saw a dreadful hunger in his eyes, a lust for chaos that transcended the physical plane. "I'll claim you," he whispered with a voice meant to ensnare and bind, splintering my thoughts into the reality of dread. But my will began to rise, igniting a flicker of defiance. Drawing strength from the very fear that threatened to consume me, I reached deeper into the core of my being, searching for the light that persisted even among the overwhelming shadows. Yet in that pivotal moment, as my heart steadied and my breath faltered, the ground shifted beneath me. A violent tremor shook the air. Crackling shadows erupted from the earth, their wails merging into dread. "You're ours," they screeched, clawing towards me as reality blurred as I braced myself, readying for the inevitable plunge. The photograph tore in my grip, scattering shards of reality in the air around us. And then, the world began to unravel, amidst the chaos. I caught a glimpse of truth in the remnants of that photograph. Me neighbor's twisted, monstrous visage had not always been this way. There was something hidden, a flicker of humanity desperately trying to resurface. Yet, before I could chase after that insight, the shadows surged forth, enveloping me completely, and a deafening silence fell once more in that suffocating dark. A thought echoed. What if what lays ahead is worse than this horror? And just before everything collapsed inward, I whispered, what have I truly become? The answer was nothing but the echo of grilled whispers. A choice unmade, and in that moment of being swept away, I understood that perhaps the greatest horror was yet to reveal itself. When I awoke, I was back in my own room, the early light of dawn filtering through the curtains. A perfect normalcy cloaked my senses, a soft breeze rustling through the trees outside. But something was irrevocably wrong, the stillness too stark, too pristine. I bolted upright, heart racing, searching the familiar surroundings. No lingering shadows in the corners, no disembodied whispers threading their way through the air, just silence. Yet, I could still feel the malevolence lurking beneath the surfacia, remnant of a night spent in anguish. Wrapped in darkness, that it wasn't until I caught my reflection in the mirror that the dread clawed back into my throat. My eyes, usually bright with life, appeared dulled, stained with an unsettling awareness. The edges of my consciousness felt frayed, and my heartbeat echoed the lingering panic of escape. Had it all been merely a dream? Relief washed over me momentarily until the reality of my final moments loomed like a dark cloud. I couldn't shake the weight of the little girl's warning. You're part of the story now. Her last plea echoed in my mind, chilling me to my very core. A gnawing dread hung in the air, thick and suffocating, and I knew that whatever had transpired hadn't truly come to an end. I felt it, watching me, waiting for the right moment to pounce as I padded downstairs. Every creak of the wooden floor a reminder of the horrors I had encountered, the crooked man, the other souls trapped in his web of darkness. My heart sank as I recalled the amalgamation of laughter that had twisted into cries of despair, shimmering figures pleading against the tide of shadows. Was it truly over? Had I escaped merely to find myself unshackled by a deeper horror? The front door creaked as I pushed it open, the scent of damp earth wafting from the garden. My cheeks brushed by a gentle wind, but it did nothing to alleviate the chilling sensation that crawled across my skin. It thrummed a warning, an anxiety that I could not place. Little did I know that one twist of fate awaited in the mundane moments ahead. Returning to my thoughts, I instinctively glanced at the house across the street. The old flannel-clad figure me neighbor was just there, standing on the porch, seemingly watching me with that same unsettling gaze. Instinctively, my heart thundered. But each time I thought of the nightmares we had faced together, a distant voice outshouted the panic. You broke the cycle. You fought for us. He raised a hand to wave, that crooked grin spreading across his lips, and a shiver ignited in my spine. Curiosity can be dangerous, he called out, each word saturated with an echo that sent chills cascading through my skull. The very shadows I thought I had defeated glimmered in his gaze. Simmering promise and dread intertwined. Panic surged anew through my veins like ice, but I could not move. "Welcome back," he said, tilting his head in amusement. Yet the malice woven into his tone sent dreadful clarity racing through me. Everything I thought I had undone lingered just around the folds of this fabricated reality. That evening, as the sun dipped low, I found myself standing before my own door, the space turning heavy and lethargic, a dark breath mingling with the winds that rustled the branches. I could still feel the pulse of the others, the lost souls, the darkness that craved me still outside of time's grip. Was it possible I had not truly escaped but rather been drawn into another tale? An eternal cycle of horror, shaping my existence like clay in the hands of a mad sculptor. Feeling absent-minded, I opened my door again, only to hear it click and latch itself tightly behind me. The air thickened, a drum roll pulsing in my ears, until the soft laughter burst forth again. It was the laughter of children, brimming with innocence, a stark contrast to the sinister underbelly. In that instant, the laughter transformed into screams. I leaped back, heart racing once more. But there was nowhere to run, only the suffocating echoes that morphed into a bone-chilling chant, repeating one terrifying line. "You're one of us now." The shadows grasped at me, thin and elongated, creeping over the floor as darkness enveloped. And then it hit me. I didn't break the cycle. I had become its new anchor. The stories, the courage and screams I bore had interwoven themselves into my very being, shackling my essence to the wails of those around me. I was the bearer of all that horror had once meant, and now, I was part of it. A shiver ran deep within me as I understood what had happened. The light inside me had drawn the very shadows I thought I escaped. They pulsed at the edge of my perception, just behind the corners of my sanity. I felt the creeping despair of the lost reach for a tether of souls longing to be free, but also eager to merge. At that moment, everything spiraled. The boundaries collapsed, trapping me in a place where light and dark wove thickly together, realities churning like an agonizing dream. Whispers grew louder. I could hear them now, children's laughter and guardian screams intermingled in a horrifying symphony of madness. And as I looked into the reflecting surface of my twisted realities, I could hear the echoes of my own voice. A small child's whisper repeating what had tethered me together forever. "Join us." That's when I finally understood the lingering truth of it all. The horror wasn't simply past. It was inscribed into the very fabric of existence. I wasn't merely a keeper of the darkness. I had become its catalyst, the author of my own new tale dragged across unsuspecting souls, entwining them forever in the sinister web that would always exist. The doors to my home swung wide as shadows enveloped me once more, and I could hear an insatiable hunger rising. And at the very edge of my sanity, in the piercing silence before the storm, I whispered the words that would forever seal my fate. "I've been waiting for you."